Welcome to the Discourse Analyzer AI Toolkit, where articles come alive. You're listening to the audio version of our article. For the full text and an interactive experience, check out the link in the description below. Interact with any selection using our AI assistant to enhance your understanding. Let's explore.
Research questions in discourse analysis. In discourse analysis, research questions guide the investigation of how language is used in various contexts to construct meaning, shape social relationships, and maintain or challenge power dynamics. These questions help researchers focus on specific aspects of language, such as how discourse reflects societal norms, how identity is constructed through communication, or how power is negotiated in interaction. The research questions in discourse analysis are often open-ended, allowing for the exploration of complex social phenomena through the analysis of texts, spoken interactions, or multimodal communication. Research questions in discourse analysis are shaped by the theoretical framework being used, e.g., critical discourse analysis, conversation analysis, multimodal discourse analysis, the context of the study, and the specific goals of the research. These questions may focus on linguistic features, social structures, ideological influences, or communicative strategies. 1. Key areas of focus in discourse analysis research questions. Language and power. Exploring how power is constructed and maintained through discourse. Research questions that focus on language and power examine how discourse reflects, reinforces, or challenges power relations in society. These questions often draw from critical discourse analysis, CDA, and explore how language is used to maintain dominance, control narratives, or resist authority. Power dynamics. How is power negotiated or reinforced in specific discourses, e.g., political speeches, media coverage? Control of knowledge. How do certain groups use discourse to control access to knowledge or shape public opinion? Resistance to power. How do marginalized groups use language to resist dominant ideologies or challenge authority? Example research questions. How is political authority constructed in presidential speeches? In what ways does media discourse on immigration reinforce or challenge existing power dynamics? How are power relations between doctors and patients negotiated through medical consultations? Identity construction. Investigating how social identities are formed through language. Research questions about identity construction focus on how individuals or groups use language to define, perform, and negotiate their identities. This can involve the study of gender, race, class, or professional identities and how these identities are constructed through discourse in different contexts. Performance of identity. How do people use language to perform or assert their social identities? Negotiation of identity. How are identities negotiated, accepted, or contested in interaction? Intersectionality. How do different social identities, e.g., gender, race, class, intersect in discourse? Example research questions. How do employees in a corporate setting construct their professional identities through workplace discourse? In what ways do students perform their gender identities in classroom interactions? How is racial identity negotiated in online discussions about social justice, ideology, and discourse? Examining the role of ideology in shaping language use. Research questions related to ideology explore how discourse reflects, promotes, or challenges particular belief systems and worldviews. These questions often focus on how language is used to naturalize certain ideologies, making them seem common sense, while marginalizing others. Ideological framing. How are specific issues framed in ways that reflect underlying ideologies? Hegemony and resistance. How do dominant ideologies become established through discourse, and how are they resisted or challenged? Cultural beliefs. How are cultural values or norms reinforced through everyday language use? Example research questions. How does the discourse of environmental sustainability reflect neoliberal ideology? In what ways is national identity constructed through the ideological framing of history textbooks? How do feminist ideologies manifest in online discussions about gender equality, social relationships, and interaction? Understanding how relationships are constructed through communication. Research questions focusing on social relationships investigate how people use language to build, maintain, or alter social relationships. This includes the study of politeness, solidarity, and hierarchy in communication, as well as how conversational structures reflect social roles and power dynamics. Turn-taking and power. How do patterns of turn-taking reflect social hierarchies in conversations? Politeness and face. How is politeness used to manage social relationships in formal or informal settings? Conflict and negotiation. How are conflicts negotiated or resolved through discourse? Example research questions. How do managers and employees negotiate power relations in workplace meetings through language? In what ways do family members maintain solidarity or manage conflict in everyday conversation? How is politeness used to navigate social hierarchies in intercultural communication? Discourse and social change. Analyzing how discourse contributes to social movements or change. Research questions that examine social change focus on how discourse can serve as a tool for activism, social movements, or shifts in public opinion. These questions often explore how new discourses emerge and challenge dominant narratives, and how language can be a catalyst for transformation in societal norms or policies. Emerging discourses. How do new forms of discourse challenge or transform existing power structures? Discursive strategies for change. What rhetorical or discursive strategies are used by social movements to influence public opinion? Media and social change. How do media representations of social issues contribute to or resist social change? Example research questions. How does the discourse of the #MeToo movement challenge traditional narratives about gender and power? What discursive strategies are used by climate change activists to frame environmental issues as urgent? How does social media discourse shape public perceptions of racial justice movements? Multimodal discourse analysis. Investigating how multiple modes of communication work together to create meaning. In multimodal discourse analysis, research questions focus on how different modes of communication, e.g., text, images, sound, gestures, work together to produce meaning. These questions explore how language interacts with visual, auditory, and other nonverbal elements to shape understanding. Interplay of modes. How do visual and textual elements combine to create meaning in advertisements or social media posts? Multimodal argumentation. How are arguments constructed using multiple modes in political or media discourse? Gestures and spoken language. How do gestures complement or contradict spoken language in face-to-face communication? Example research questions. How do visual and textual elements work together to frame political messages in campaign advertisements? In what ways do gestures and body language reinforce or challenge verbal communication in classroom interactions? How are environmental issues represented through the combination of images and text in news articles? Conversation analysis. Studying the structure and organization of everyday talk. In conversation analysis, CA, research questions focus on the structures of spoken interaction, such as how conversations are initiated, maintained, and closed. These questions explore the rules and conventions that govern turn-taking, repair mechanisms, and sequence organization in everyday talk. Turn-taking systems. How do participants manage turn-taking in informal conversations versus formal interactions? Repair and correction. How do speakers repair misunderstandings or clarify meanings in conversation? Adjacency pairs. How are adjacency pairs, e.g., question-answer, offer acceptance, used to organize interaction? Example research questions. How are turn-taking norms negotiated in multi-party conversations, such as group meetings or family discussions? In what ways do speakers manage repairs and corrections in conversations involving sensitive or controversial topics? How do question-answer sequences vary in formal interviews versus casual conversations? Discursive practices in institutions. Investigating how language is used within institutional settings. Research questions focusing on discursive practices in institutions examine how language is used in formal settings such as education, healthcare, law, or business. These questions explore how institutional power is exercised, how professional identities are constructed, and how knowledge is produced and controlled through discourse. Institutional talk. How do professionals in specific fields, e.g., doctors, lawyers, teachers, use language to assert authority or convey expertise? Bureaucratic discourse. How does bureaucratic language shape interactions between institutions and the public? Professional identity. How is professional identity constructed through language in institutional settings? Example research questions. How do doctors construct their authority in medical consultations through the use of specialized medical jargon? What role does bureaucratic discourse play in shaping public access to social services? How is legal discourse used to frame arguments and establish credibility in courtroom settings? Discourse and media representation. Analyzing how media constructs social realities. Research questions related to media representation focus on how discourse in the media reflects, constructs, or challenges social realities. These questions explore how media texts shape public opinion, construct identities, and reflect ideologies through language, framing, and multimodal elements. Media framing. How are specific issues framed in media coverage, and what ideological positions do these frames reflect? Representation of social groups. How are marginalized or minority groups represented in media discourse? Narrative and ideology. How do media narratives shape public understanding of social, political, or cultural issues? Example research questions. How is climate change framed in news media across different political ideologies? In what ways do media portrayals of women in leadership positions challenge or reinforce traditional gender roles? How are refugees represented in Western media, and what impact does this representation have on public attitudes toward immigration? 2. Examples of research questions in discourse analysis. Example 1. Language and power in political discourse. Research question. How does political discourse in presidential debates construct authority and legitimacy? Focus. This question explores the linguistic strategies politicians use to assert power and authority, including rhetorical devices, tone, and framing. Example 2. Identity construction in online communities. Research question. In what ways do members of online gaming communities construct their identities through discourse? Focus. This question investigates how participants use language, slang, and shared references to establish group membership and negotiate social identities in digital spaces. Example 3. Ideology in environmental discourse. Research question. How does the discourse of environmental sustainability reflect neoliberal ideologies in corporate reports? Focus. This question looks at how corporate language frames sustainability in terms of profit, efficiency, and growth, reflecting broader economic ideologies. Example 4. Media representation of gender. Research question. How do fashion magazines construct gender roles through visual and textual elements in advertisements? Focus. This question examines how images, text, and layout in advertisements work together to reinforce or challenge traditional gender norms. Conclusion. Research questions in discourse analysis are fundamental to guiding the investigation of how language constructs meaning, shapes identities, and reflects social power. These questions help researchers explore complex phenomena like ideology, power, identity, and social change across a variety of contexts, from political speeches to online forums and media representations. Whether focusing on spoken or written texts, research questions in discourse analysis allow for a detailed exploration of the intricate relationship between language, society, and meaning. Frequently asked questions. What are research questions in discourse analysis, and why are they important? Research questions in discourse analysis guide the study of how language is used to construct meaning, shape social relationships, and negotiate power dynamics. They focus on various aspects of language, such as identity construction, ideological influences, and communicative strategies. These open-ended questions are crucial because they allow researchers to explore complex social phenomena through the analysis of texts, spoken interactions, or multimodal communication. How do research questions explore the relationship between language and power? Research questions focusing on language and power examine how discourse reflects or challenges power dynamics in society. They often draw from critical discourse analysis, CDA, to explore how language is used to maintain dominance or resist authority. For example, questions like, how is political authority constructed in presidential speeches? Investigate the linguistic strategies that politicians use to assert power, including framing, tone, and rhetorical devices. What types of research questions focus on identity construction? Research questions about identity construction explore how individuals or groups use language to define and perform their social identities. These can include questions like, how do employees in a corporate setting construct their professional identities through workplace discourse? Such questions investigate how language is used to negotiate, assert, or contest identities, and may consider intersections of gender, race, class, and other social categories. How can research questions address ideology in discourse? Questions related to ideology examine how discourse reflects, promotes, or challenges particular belief systems. They often focus on how language naturalizes certain ideologies, making them appear as common sense. For example, how does the discourse of environmental sustainability reflect neoliberal ideology? Looks at how corporate language frames sustainability in terms of profit and efficiency, thus reinforcing specific economic ideologies. What do research questions about social relationships and interaction focus on? These research questions investigate how people use language to build, maintain, or change social relationships. They might focus on aspects like turn-taking, politeness, and hierarchy in communication. For instance, how do managers and employees negotiate power relations in workplace meetings through language? Explores how conversational structures reflect social roles and power dynamics within a professional setting. How do research questions in discourse analysis address social change? Questions examining social change focus on how discourse serves as a tool for activism, social movements, or shifts in public opinion. For example, how does the discourse of the #MeToo movement challenge traditional narratives about gender and power? Investigates how emerging discourses disrupt existing power structures and contribute to societal transformation. What kinds of research questions are used in multimodal discourse analysis? Multimodal discourse analysis research questions focus on how different communication modes, e.g., text, images, sound, interact to produce meaning. For example, how do visual and textual elements work together to frame political messages in campaign advertisements? Looks at how various semiotic resources combine to shape understanding and influence audiences. How do conversation analysis research questions contribute to discourse analysis? Conversation analysis, CA. Research questions examine the structures of spoken interaction, such as turn-taking, repair mechanisms, and sequence organization. For instance, how are turn-taking norms negotiated in multi-party conversations, such as group meetings or family discussions? These questions explore the rules and conventions governing everyday talk, revealing how social roles and interactions are managed in real time. What are research questions in the context of discursive practices in institutions? These questions investigate how language is used within formal settings like education, healthcare, law, or business. They explore how institutional power is exercised and how professional identities are constructed. An example question is, how do doctors construct their authority in medical consultations through the use of specialized medical jargon? Which examines how language functions to assert expertise and authority in institutional contexts. How do research questions in discourse analysis explore media representation? Research questions related to media representation focus on how media discourse constructs social realities, frames issues, and shapes public opinion. For example, how is climate change framed in news media across different political ideologies? Investigates how media texts reflect and construct ideological positions through language and framing.